I'm excited now to introduce our next speaker, an energetic blend of stateswoman, physician, manager, politician, and international activist, Dr. Gro Brundtland. She's always led the world on issues of global significance. For over 4 decades, she has dedicated herself to global interdependence, focusing on promoting sustainable development, increasing environmental awareness, and advocating for good health as a basic human right. Dr. Brundtland spent 10 years as a physician and a scientist, and 25 years in public office, including 10 years as the Prime Minister of Norway, the first woman and the youngest person to ever do so. She was the chair of the World Commission of Environment and Development and the first female Director General of the World Health Organization. Her forward-thinking and global awareness continues to elevate her worldwide profile. She served as the UN Special Envoy on Climate Change, seeking ways to balance human enterprise and the planet's limits. The guiding force behind the Brundtland Report on Sustainability over 20 years ago, she maintains her focus on the development impact of climate change and global warming. And as a member of the Elders, a group founded by Nelson Mandela with fellow elders Graça Machel, Kofi Annan, Jimmy Carter, Mary Robinson, and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, she contributes her wisdom, her independent leadership, and integrity to tackling the world's toughest problems. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podium our very, very distinguished guest, Dr. Gro Brundtland.
Well, thank you very much indeed for this wonderful introduction. But first of all, Narayana Murthy, members of the Infosys Foundation, and the prize winners, and members of the jury, ladies and gentlemen. I am really happy. It is a great pleasure to be here this evening and sharing the stage with such eminent people and such good friends. I'm also glad to be able to congratulate the winners of the Infosys Prize 2012. From all that the jury has said about their work, it is evident that we have among us a special set of people who are changing their own field and are touching our lives. My congratulations go to the winners and to the Infosys Science Foundation for recognizing them and their excellent work. The list of all the awardees, men and women, who have been given this great honor over the past few years is indeed an impressive one. I would like to share my thoughts with you this evening on why it is so important to recognize the role of science and research in our lives, and how I see progress in this field being directly linked to economic and social development. As a medical doctor and former head of the World Health Organization, I am a great believer in science and evidence. Medicine is one of the disciplines that have profited most from scientific progress over the last 2 centuries. The great breakthrough for scientific modern medicine came with biomedical research based on testable and reproducible results. And the results have been dramatic. Most progress has, of course, been made in the countries that were in the forefront of modern science. In my home country, Norway, a child born today can expect to live until the age of 81. In India, life expectancy has doubled over the last 50 years or so to over 65. This is, however, not only the result of progress in medical science. For science to realize its potential to improve people's lives, political, economic, and social circumstances must also be conducive. Public health and diet are decisive factors in helping people to live longer and healthier lives. Improvement in this regard, in turn, requires better governance, education, infrastructure, and living standards based on human rights and opportunities for all. This shows that progress in science is not in itself a sufficient precondition for social and economic development, but scientific progress is a necessary condition for progress, and now more than ever. I say this not only as a medical doctor, but also as the former chairperson of the World Commission on Environment and Development. The first industrial revolution was staked on the discovery and exploitation of fossil fuel as a source of energy, including to drive textile mills. That discovery, like the subsequent development of railroads, steamships, and steel manufacturing, was made by experimenting inventors and engineers rather than theory-driven scientists. However, the second industrial revolution, that of mass production, was more science-intensive. Scientists heralded the advances in electricity and chemistry in the second half of the 19th century. Industrial science came to depend not only on cheap fossil fuel, but also on an exponential increase in the interactions among scientists, engineers, technicians, and business people. Modern industry transformed and keeps transforming large parts of the world, but its great weakness is that it remains overwhelmingly dependent on limited natural resources, and especially non-renewable resources. Many of these resources are getting scarce. Our natural environment is suffering from unsustainable exploration, production, and consumption. The greatest threat today is man-made carbon emissions, causing destructive climate change. And this cannot continue. We need to find ways for all to prosper without destroying our physical and biological surroundings. So the most pressing task is to develop renewable, clean energy sources to replace fossil fuel. And in this endeavor, science must and will lead the way. We must leverage science to improve energy and energy efficiency and develop new sustainable energy sources. I firmly believe that the countries that first make the transition will be the leaders of the next generation. Emerging economies like India and China have a particular stake in the transition to a future based on clean energy. And it seems to me that you are indeed stepping up to the challenge. The UNESCO Science Report from 2010 shows that India, China, Brazil, and other fast-developing countries are spending more on science as their economies grow. Driven largely by China, India, and the Republic of Korea, Asia's share of global spending on science rose from 27% in 2002 to 32% in 2007. The share of North America, Europe, and Japan declined proportionately. Especially China is now making great strides as a scientific power, not least in research into energy conservation and into renewable energy. However, as we all know, climate change is not a national but a global challenge. We need to collaborate to meet it. Fortunately, more than ever, science is global too. Individual scientists and scientific knowledge have always crossed borders. The scientific revolution that began in Europe in the 16th century was founded upon important advances from the rest of the world, notably China, India, and the Arab world. Today, institutions and countries are increasingly joining forces in science across the globe. This goes for energy-related research, as it does for medicine and most other scientific endeavors. And this is an aspect of globalization that we can all only welcome and encourage. So, ladies and gentlemen, globalization offers us unprecedented opportunities for developing countries like India to harness science to make economic and social progress. I believe you face a twofold challenge. On the one hand, you need research and education institutions that can compete with the best in the world. On the other, you should develop science that is adapted to and that addresses your particular context. So developing world class scientific and educational institutions, developing them into world-class ones would help stem the brain drain, the loss of the best scientists, technologists, and other specialists to developed countries. I believe policy in this regard should include considerable investment in research, both public and private, improving science education, especially at university level, increasing collaboration between universities and industry, national academies, and other institutions that do promote dialogue with stakeholders, and certainly increasing international collaboration. New educational institutions of this sort will provide an opportunity for including the brightest young people, both women and men, in the science of the future. This science can, with new technologies of online learning, reach hundreds of millions of students in developing countries. However, as the world is changing, we should also reconsider somewhat our concept of science. Today, a new concept is gaining more attention: frugal science. Cost-effective, frugal science is adapted to and addresses the context of developing countries. It is particularly geared to generating knowledge that serves the needs of the poor. Now, health care is one area here to consider as an example. Western medicine is today increasingly costly and often unnecessarily inefficient. Major efforts are now being made to try and correct considerable misallocations of resources in the ways and practices of healthcare in the Western world. I believe affordable healthcare, globally speaking, requires much more development of science that is cost-conscious as part of the total analysis of these crucial issues for all of humanity. So, to copy the systems of the West is certainly not the way to go. To define solutions that can benefit developing countries and the large unmet needs of poor populations. Now, in these global efforts, the UN system, many partners, foundations such as Gates, Wellcome, and others, like the United Nations Foundation, by the way, on which I serve personally, are already active participants. This is a development WHO, the World Health Organization, was engaged in from the start of this new era of more partnerships, of more looking at the whole, that started more than a decade ago. Because clearly the science base for low-cost diagnostics, vaccines, and improved nutrition is of the essence. So frugal science may get a somewhat reluctant welcome in research institutions and universities of America and Europe. But it should certainly flourish in Beijing, Mumbai, and Cairo. And where that happens may determine whose grandchildren are the ones that have jobs in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, the first industrial revolution put Great Britain ahead of its rivals in wealth and in power, well into the 19th century. Most of the technological innovations of the second industrial revolution, however, originated in Germany and the United States. Other countries followed closely behind. Among them were the other nations of Western Europe, including Norway, but also Russia and Japan. Now, when we are entering an industrial revolution, China, India, and other emerging economies are catching up. In a sense, what is happening is a return to more normal. Remember, China was more technologically advanced than Europe and had a similar standard of living until perhaps the 16th century. So the first industrial revolution emerged from the mechanization of the textile industry. The driving force of the Industrial Revolution was mass production. The new Industrial Revolution has come from joining internet communication technology and renewable energies, and from digital manufacturing allowing mass customization. The new Industrial Revolution will require a combination of expensive and frugal science. Countries and companies that embrace both will be at the forefront of this next phase of human progress. India and emphasis can certainly be there, helping us all advance towards a sustainable common future. So as I reflect, to conclude, upon the many issues I have been focused on during my lifetime in research, politics, and international collaboration, and in the building of effective alliances to help move the world forward, I am still an optimist in the midst of many setbacks and unnecessarily slow progress sometimes. My belief in our combined abilities as human beings to learn, to share, and to grow our societies while safeguarding our common future is still dominating in my mind. Because I'm sure, I'm convinced, we can do this together if we fully appreciate that we must do it while fully realizing the potential of all our women as well as all our men. Thank you so much.